Hey guys, I'm back again and I'm here to do my July wrap up. And wow, I really read a lot of books in July, and two of them were over 500 pages. So yeah, I killed it. I really killed it in July. I read 8 books, and the majority of them were really good. So let's get started, so this won't be too long, because 8 books, talking about 8 books is a lot. So alright, so we're gonna get started. So if you hear a buzzing in the background, that's my little mini fan that I have on, because it's hot as heck today. So yeah, I need a fan on. Like you can probably see, I'm like sweating, like crazy. Alright, so the first book on my list, I don't own it. I have it on Kindle, and so it's right here. It's called House Made of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday. So Christy and I read this for the podcast, so you'll eventually be getting the discussion on that. When the podcast episode comes up, you'll get more of a detailed explanation of what we thought about that. But as I can say here, I wanted to read this book. Okay, it's a Pulitzer Prize, I think, winning book. But not only that, I really wanted to read it because it was written by a Native American. And so I was really anxious, to get into it. Sadly, it was not an enjoyable reading experience because it was the way he goes about telling the story is very broken up. So it's the story of a man called Abel. He has just come back from World War II. He is basically broken, addicted to alcohol, sex, lots of things he's addicted to. He's trying to escape in any way he possibly can. And as we read through the tragic story of Abel, we're getting also the cultural aspects of Native Americans on and off the reservations. So I feel like this is a book that everybody should try to read. And I think I possibly might try to read this a second time if possible, but it was just so uncomfortable to read. And it's because he tells the story in broken up pieces, but it's really hard to piece things together. Sometimes you have to reread things like 4 and 5 times to understand what's going on and to kind of piece it together with what you read before. But I would say give it a try, and it could be something new that, you could learn more about, which is Native American life. So that was number 1. The next book on the list is Brown Girl, Brown Stones. And this is by Paul Marshall or Paulie Marshall. And this is also another book that I read with Christy for the podcast. I think Paulie Marshall's parents are from Barbados, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if there are any Caribbean people out there watching this. And this is a story that I found really interesting because it kind of has a similar coloring to it as Raisin in the Sun. So this one, the family is living in New York, and quite quickly we see the composition of the family is mom, dad that are from the islands, and their 2 daughters. And the father has received some land back in the islands, and the father is constantly dreaming about going back to Barbados, building a beautiful big white house, and just having like another life, like as if it would be like a secondary home, a place where they could go in summer and stuff. But the mother, she has a totally different idea about what she wants from this property. And that's where the story kind of really takes off. Now, I enjoyed this book. I think I gave it about a 3.5, but I had some issues with it. So the first part of the book feels really, a certain extent, a little distant, in my opinion, whereas the second part of the book felt much more comfortable, as if though the author was writing from the soul, like what she really, really knew. So it gets better, but the beginning, like that first half, can be difficult in parts, and it just is because it feels like it drags, and that it's kind of like, and you don't know exactly where this is going, or what is she trying to do, why is it dragging so much. But as a whole, the book is really good because it does talk a lot about the difficulties of people trying to live life in New York with their Caribbean roots, and how ascension is is key. It's primordial for these families. And so this is a classic, I think, and it is something that we should read. Pauline Marshall is someone we should read. Although I don't hear very many people talking about Pauline Marshall, but definitely something that I do not regret reading, because it has been sitting on my bookshelf for, I hate to say this, but about 8 years. But the most important thing is it's done. I've read it. Now I want to get to some of other Pauline Marshall's books. So yeah, this was a good discovery for me, and an excellent discussion on the podcast with Christy. Okay, the next book on my list is The Joys of Motherhood by Bushi Yamashita. Okay, now Bushi Yamashita, I discovered her through an IG influencer called Sarah, who has a podcast called Books and Rhymes. She talked about this book in particular, and I immediately purchased it and didn't get a chance to read it. But this was the Read So Lit Book Club pick for the month of July. And let me tell you, this is a 5-star book. Like, if you have not read The Joys of Motherhood, where have you been? Now, Bushi Yamashita is Nigerian, but she immigrated to Great Britain, so you can also consider her as Black British. This is the story of Inu Ego, and she is the woman who we are following closely around this theme of motherhood. Now, this book is going to make you mad as hell, okay? Because it made me mad as hell, okay? For the way women are treated in Nigeria around the idea of motherhood. A woman is not a woman unless she has children for her husband. And we see very quickly how women uphold this part of the patriarchy, in turn causing strife amongst all women for different reasons. But the thing about this book is it's super short, because it's not even 250 pages. It's like 224 pages. But not only that, it's the way that Bushi Yamashita constructs the story. She is so thorough, okay, that she leaves no stone unturned. She's thorough about explaining to you the intricacies and the difficulties of Nigerian culture, specifically pertaining to women, marriage, motherhood, that whole thing. But not only that, it has a ton, I mean a ton of excellent quotes. Oh my God. We loved this book a lot, even though it made us mad as hell. We loved it a lot, and I can't wait to get to more Bushi Yamashita, because I tell you, to have the gift to write like this, where you can tell a story, be thorough, get your point across, and not have to be long-winded at 600-700 pages, props. I highly recommend that you pick this one up. It is really, really good. Okay, the next book on my list was this, La Samoa by Zola. So this is book 8 in the Rougon Macau series. This book right here, it follows, the main character is Gervais, and Gervais is a part of the Macau part of the family, so the illegitimate part of the family. And the book begins with Gervais and Lantier, which is her man, her boyfriend. They're not married. But she falls pregnant, and then they decide to move from Plassans to Paris. And let me tell you, the hell begins. Her man Lantier is a crook, a misogynist, a user, a jerk. He's everything bad. And they wind up having 2 boys. And right off from the beginning, you can see that Lantier is looking for a way out of his marriage, and he's looking for a way to make money without having to do any work. Gervais is a hard worker. She's spunky. She's brass. She knows what she has to do, and she gets to it, and she wants to take care of her boys and live better. So that's all I'm going to tell you. All I'm going to say is you got to get your mind right. Okay? Because this one, there's nothing cute about this one. Okay? La Samoa is a book that talks a lot about how alcohol was the thing in the late 19th century that was devastating families and people. Because alcohol was very strong. It was like, it wasn't, 30-degree alcohol. It was like 90, So it was cooking people's brain, driving them insane, and killing them. So this book tells the story of Gervais, and you don't have to read the Rougon Macau series in order. Anna and I are reading it in order because that is something that we have always wanted to do as French speakers. So that's what we're doing. But a lot of people just read certain parts of this series. And this happens to be one of the books that a lot of French people have read because either they had to read it for school, or it's just one of the more popular of the Rougon Macau series. It's so well written. It's going to make you mad as hell. There was a couple of times I think I actually threw my book against the wall. I was so pissed off. Angry. Made me angry. And then it made me want to cry. And I was just like, Lord Jesus, deliver me from this story with Gervais. But I highly recommend this one. 5 stars. Okay, now the next book on my list is this beauty right here. The Book of Night Women by Marlon James. Okay, now, I've had this book since it was published and had never gotten to it. I kept saying, I'm going to get to it, I'm going to get to it. So my first Marlon James was actually A Brief History of 7 Killings. And now this is my second one, The Book of Night Women. And oh my God, this book is so freaking good. Now, let me tell you, this is a slave story, so you got to get your mind right. I'm just going to tell you right now. But Marlon James does such a beautiful writing of the women in this story. It's astounding. It's astounding. This is the story of Lilith, and Lilith is conceived from a union that she's not very clear or she doesn't really understand, who is her, her parents. But she's being raised by a woman, and she is, I think in the beginning of the story, she might be like 13 or 14 years old, and she's naive to the ways of what's going on the plantation. And very quickly, we get an incident that happens which charges the story with information about Lilith and about the different people on the plantation. So two of the main characters are Lilith, who's a young teenage girl, and then we have Homer, who is a slave who's been on the plantation for a long time, who's probably like in her, I would say she's in her 40s, early 40s or something like that. But let me tell you, this story gives you all of the complexities of slavery from the slave's point of view. And it's very realistic the way it's done. And it definitely will make you think. Now, I consume this story in different ways. So I did sit down and read the book and like was marveled over the writing, and the dialogues they were so real and so crisp and just so informative. And then when I would go on my walks, because I read this in July and we had some really good weather, so I would go out really early in the morning and walk, and I would listen to some parts of this book. And let me tell you, if you don't want to read it and you prefer listening to it, definitely get the audiobook, because I think it's Robin Miles that does the reading of this. And oh my God, she killed it. Okay? It was so good. I just enjoyed this book so much and kept saying, oh, damn, why did I wait so long to read this book? It's just, I mean, the construction of the character of Lilith, the main themes, which is on freedom and love, that is does the slave have the right to be in love, and with whom? Themes like freedom is something that all slaves really want, but are women allowed to be leading, slave rebellions and stuff like that? You get everything in there, from the sexism to the racism to the violence of slavery, of the abuse, to watching Lilith, who's a teenager in the beginning, grow up and all the things that she goes through in order to become a woman later on. It's just chocked full of truth, and it's something that everybody should read. I think, like if you haven't read Marlon James yet, this one is the one you should start with. Excellent, excellent, excellent. 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read on the list was this beauty here, The Three Musketeers, which is by Alexandre Dumas. There he is on the back. Okay, this was the Read Soul Lit Summer Read Along. And we had talked about it for a couple of years now, since we read the Count of Monte Cristo. I think we read it. It was in the fall when we read it or something like that. I'm not sure if it was in July, but since we had read that, we had all just said, we need to read The Three Musketeers. Like, come on, we need more Alexandre Dumas. We need more Alexandre Dumas. So I decided to pull this one out and have us do this one. Now, it is quite the chunker, weighing in at like 670 something pages. But let me tell you, this was super fun to read, swashbuckling, humoristic. I actually laughed out loud, which I haven't laughed out loud in a long time while reading a book. And it gives you a little bit of aspect on the French royalty, and just a great book about friendship. That's for me, this is what the book is about. This is the importance of friendship, and what that means to be friends with someone, to be good friends with someone. So we have the main character is D'Artagnan, and he's very young, and he is going off to make his way. So he leaves his house with his yellow horse. You have to read the book to find out about that yellow horse. And a note or a letter written from his father to the person who is supposed to give him a job so that he can become a musketeer. And And on the way there, an incident happens to him and his letter gets stolen. But he manages to get out of it and get to, I think his name is Monsieur de la Ville. And there is where the story starts. Now, D'Artagnan is like, in the beginning, he like scrappy and he like getting into fights with people all the time. And it's just really funny because all of the people he picks fights with in the beginning become his good friends, who are the Three Musketeers. So it's called the Three Musketeers, and there are actually four. So it's called the Three Musketeers because you have three Musketeers in the beginning, which is Porthos, Aramis, and Athos. And then we have D'Artagnan is the +1. I tell you, this book was so much fun to read, and Tatiana and Michael and I had a blast talking about it. And if you want to hear what we thought about it, you can check out the video of our live discussing it at the end of July. It's, you can check it. I'll link it below. Just such a good read, so much fun, and very intriguing because as you're reading along, you have no idea what's going to happen next. And in the fashion of Dumas' writing, he's very good at pulling out, funny or extraordinary circumstances in which things happen and keeping us hooked, is keeping us hooked the whole time. So yes, it's a long book, but you know what? I didn't really sweat the amount of pages. I really got sucked into the story. I enjoyed reading about D'Artagnan and the other Three Musketeers, where they were going, what was going to happen, trying to guess what was going to happen, and then getting a couple of, oh, really? Oh, no. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and I think you should read the Three Musketeers, and you should also read The Count of Monte Cristo. Yes, they're long books, but they're very enjoyable, and they'll add some color to your reading. Three Musketeers is going to add a lot of humor as well. And The Count of Monte Cristo is just, it's so, it's so entertaining, but it is very mysterious and just a wonderful read. So I highly recommend this one. Get on it, Three Musketeers. Okay, the next book on my list was The Concubine, and this is by Aleshi Amadi. Aleshi Amadi is another Nigerian writer. Now, I have to warn you about this one. Okay, so this copy is from the African Writers series, which is from Heinemann. And let me tell you, I was reading this with Christy for the podcast, and this is what happened to me. I opened the book. Now, I've had this book for a minute, but I didn't realize this. So I open the book, I read, that's chapter 1, the first page, and then look at page 2. There's nothing there. So I had to go and send DMs to a lot of people and see, I DM'd Christy and say, Christy, hey girl, have you got page 2? Because I ain't got it. And she had a Kindle edition. So somebody else that I know had this edition, and her edition was fine. Her page 2 was there. So she sent me a copy of page 2. Yeah, that was not a good start. So I said, okay, we're going to continue. But as I continued reading, what I didn't like about this edition is that there were like little issues with the printing, with first dark printing, really, really dark printing. But not only that, funny ways that sentences were written, like it hadn't been edited properly or something. So I found this a tragedy to read. But this being said, I did enjoy the story, which is about this main character. Her name is Iuma, and she is married to a man in her village, but quickly she becomes a widow. And from that, we kind of see, here again, this is another story that talks about the myrrhs around the idea of a woman in marriage. So there are all the myrrhs, which we learn about in the Joys of Motherhood, around being a mother and being married. And in this book, we learn a lot about the myrrhs around being a widow. And they're very specific. And we see Iuma, who is young and beautiful, but she still abides by all of these myrrhs that she's supposed to abide by. But as time goes on in the story, things happen that are very unexplained that make the book very interesting. Now, it's a short book, but I think there are parts in this book that are kind of slow, in my opinion, and which make it not a 5-star book. I don't even think it makes it a 4-star book. I think it makes it more like a 3-star book. And not only that, the title of the book is also not giving what you expect. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not getting into details about that. But this being said, I'm not mad that I read it. I read it and I got a very good discussion out of it with Christy. And just stay tuned for that discussion on our podcast. Okay, last but not least, I read A Different Drummer by William Melvin Kelly. And I read this one as well with Christy for the podcast. And OMG, this book right here, this is 5 stars. Okay, this is probably one of the most surprising books that I've read of the year 2022. Alongside the Book of Night Women. Those are probably my absolute top 2 books so far this year. But this book right here, now, this William Melvin Kelly he's something else. He knew how to write a book, okay? This is a book that focuses on a made-up town somewhere in the South. But the thing about the story is the way it's written. So the story seems to be narrated by white people, but it's really about black people. So black people are doing all of the action and the important things in the book, and the white people are sort of narrating it. So it's almost trying to make it look like the white people are center of the book, but they're really not. And I kind of like that, because that's kind of like a little bit kind of like in reality is this idea that whiteness is centered and blackness is, secondary. And what he does is he flips on that, and he does it in a very interesting way. And what you have is a take on the Great Migration. So a lot of the black people one day, right after one of the main characters gets fed up and burns up all his stuff, gets the stuff he wants, puts it in a wagon beside his wife, his pregnant wife and child, and they ride out of town. And from there, we have a long succession of black people in that town leaving. And let me tell you, just some of the best writing I've read all year. Just very conservative with his words, but very intentional with his words. And not only that, but it's the structure of how it's done, flipping between the omniscient narrator and various different white people in this town. I tell you, those black people shine in this book, and it's just so damn good. It's so damn interesting to read. So I do have here, right here, I have another book by him, which is called Dancers on the Shore. which is a short story collection, which I am soon going to pick up and read because, damn, this William Melvin Kelly, he was the bomb.com. And this is an author that has literally gone unnoticed. Now, this is a reprinted copy. I can't remember who. This was gifted to me by Anchor Books. And let me tell you, I don't understand what it is around some Black authors being literally forgotten. So sad, because with writing like this, I don't see how you can be forgotten. That's why we have to stop just praising the same authors over and over again. I love Toni Morrison. I love Alice Walker. I love Maya Angelou. I love James Baldwin. But there were other people writing as well. And they need to get that recognition as well, because they're doing things differently. And we need to see the full Black experience, the full writing experience from Black people. And so this is why I strongly urge you to read A Different Drummer, William Melvin Kelly. I mean, do not miss out on this one. It's excellent. So that's it. That's my July. It was thebomb.com. I read so many really good books. I had a great reading experience in July. I hope to have at least 1 or 2 more months of experiences like this before the end of the year 2022. Because I tell you, when you read so many good books in a row, it just kind of blows your mind. You're thinking, wow, what have I been reading up until today, you know? So comment below. Let me know what you think about these books. Let me know if you've read any of these and liked them, or if you're interested in reading them. And I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.